Hey, you guys, welcome back. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio Live, which is this show once a week, and it's nice to be back with you again. Um, Before we get into it, well, I hope you had a good week. I wanted to tell you that. But before we really get into the show material, I wanted to remind you that just in case we ever cover anything controversial that the powers that be don't totally approve of, obviously trying never to do that, but in case we do and disappear, then we don't want to lose touch with you completely. And if you can go to lostartsradio.com and sign up for the mailing list there, then we'll use that as a backup if we lose all capability of live streaming, or if we lose even the ability to make videos. I don't know how bad it's going to get. We're going to see. Hopefully things are going to turn around before that point, but just in case, it doesn't cost any money or anything. Just sign up for that mailing list, and then if we have to get anything to you and we can't tell you in a video like we're trying to do these days, then you won't be out of touch, and that would be nice. And a little bit later in the show, Doug, our engineer, is going to come on and tell you about how to not lose touch with us for live streaming as well, because that's usually the first thing that they stop you from doing if you're breaking imaginary rules, or terms of service, or community guidelines, or stuff like that that's never defined. Then the live streaming could go away. So just in case, Doug will come out with a couple of words for that in a few minutes. In the meantime, looking around today, we put the title on this video that we are a level 0 civilization. Life on Earth at this point, humanity, are supposedly intelligent, life form. There's insanity of all kinds around us in the world today, and they're all coming from the same source. And when Dr. Stephen Greer, who I'd recommend you take a look at his videos, still on YouTube, by the way, he's got some really good stuff on there, and I think he's maybe still left up because they figure people think he's just too crazy to take seriously, but a lot of people do take him seriously. And he's got very valuable information, and he said that more advanced races of beings see the current Earth life as level 0 civilization, and that in simple terms, that's just one that's busy most of the time destroying itself, which is of course what this one is doing. And now we do have representatives to lead us into the destruction, but we're supporting them by being so unconscious ourselves, and that's a big part of the picture. So in the news, what are some examples of the latest insanity? I think you could think of a few, right? Probably quite a few. Although if you're watching mainstream news, then they're lying about almost all of them. But if you are looking at private, independent news media, then you probably are in touch with a lot of it. You'll see examples, and one of the things that they bring to mind is that there's really two kinds of human intelligence. One of them is what they measure on the IQ tests, like some of us older guys took and women took in the 50s and afterwards in elementary school, and they were mostly those tests were centered around pattern recognition. They would show you, 4 or 5 different squares of some kind of design, and then they tell you which one to pick out that should be next in the sequence. And the same with numbers and pictures and all kinds of stuff. That kind of IQ measures, it does measure something, but it's like what kind of a tool you've got in how well your mind and your brain work, but it doesn't say what you're going to use them for or what they're going to end up being used for. And a lot of people do great on that kind of test and then fail on the real life kind. And what's the other kind? It's like common sense, direct perception of what makes sense and what doesn't. So let's look at an example, and I'll try to keep it, just for the sake of staying on the air longer, something that nobody could ever be offended or any controversy about. Let's say abortion, which actually shouldn't be a partisan issue at all. It should be super obvious if we pass the second kind of IQ test, but a lot of people are not passing that right now. A lot of intelligent people are saying that abortion is freedom of choice, women's rights. Friends of mine, really smart friends of mine, many of them believe that. They really passed the first IQ test with flying colors, and the second one, not. So those people don't realize they are victims of a malicious programming because their common sense would work and it's been stolen from them. So it doesn't work at the moment. It doesn't mean it's dead, it's just dormant. It's really incredible, though, what this programming does that comes from our global rulers, and they're very good at it. And they can make you look right at a developing human baby and have no perception that there is any individual life there. They might think, well, it's a form, it's just got this automatic stuff happening. They're trying to use words like embryonic pulse instead of a heartbeat, right? So you think, oh, well, that's an embryonic pulse. There's no life. And it's just part of the mother's body, like a fingernail or something that she should have the freedom to cut off if she wants to, obviously. And they think it's just a normal part, like an organ of the woman's body. And it's in the way. And people who have memory, they know that if a new person doesn't come in when the zygote is starting to multiply in the human mother's body, then the DNA doesn't line up and the multiplication doesn't happen. Cells don't divide. But if the baby's there, which could be you or me, in a little earlier time in this lifetime for us, then we're directing the genes to fine-tune the vehicle that person will use to experience life. That doesn't come from something I'm quoting, okay? It doesn't come out of a respected scientific journal. And maybe it wouldn't be controversial because they'd all think I'm crazy. I don't even have any Nobel Prizes or anything, and I'm not a medical doctor. But if the cells are dividing and the genes are lining up the right way that baby needs, then the person is there, the baby is there, just not breathing air quite yet, a few months early. But at the early stages, my direct perception of this is that the baby's completely conscious, and there's a lot of other people that know this. You don't need a religion to tell you this, guys. It was true long before any religions that we know about even existed or were thought about. This is part of the design principles of the way this world's built. And I'm willing to be considered as crazy by those of you who are not ready to look at this. Because for those of you who are, it's important. And it's also an illustration of the insanity that is being intentionally engineered in the world, to know that the baby's there in the early stages, completely conscious, building the body, total love and trust for the mother, and he or she does not really want to be killed, to say the least. Doesn't really want any sharp pain or caustic salt bath torturing and killing him or her. It's not a thing. It's really a sacred trust for the mother to honor. And you don't need me or anybody to tell you this. You shouldn't. You are in the same vulnerable position with your own mother while you were developing your body, and nobody killed you. And that's why you're able to listen to us today. So you have the chance to grace the world with your own presence and beauty because you weren't killed. And nobody said, well, you're part of your mother's body. You never were part of your mother's body. You were you. And when you just had the beginning of your own body, it didn't belong to anybody else. It was your own body. So women's rights is completely valid. Absolutely something to honor. But killing somebody else is not part of that. And it's not any condemnation of anybody that's had an abortion. Absolutely not at all. All of us have done really bad mistakes because we didn't know. And even if we knew intellectually, we didn't really know. Because if we had really known, we never would have even considered it. So you didn't know, and now you know. And, nobody's to blame. Nobody is to blame. Even the people who are intentionally pushing these programs, celebrating killing babies and worse. I mean, well, maybe not worse, but other things that are bad. They don't know either. They think they know all about it. They don't have a clue. They think that they're going to get rewarded by being devoted to darkness. And yeah, but it's not going to be the kind of reward they think they're going to get. So if you're in that position, you have a chance to rethink it, no matter how much you've already done. And it would be a really good idea, because you're the same beautiful being as everybody else, no matter what you've done. Nobody's going to be lost. But why set up an immediate future for yourself that is not pleasant? So time to think about it. And the governors, people in positions of power and influence, the governors of Virginia, New York, and other states have fallen into that darkness. They're not intrinsically bad. I think this is a mistake that's easy to make. They don't need to be doomed forever. They won't be, because they're made out of the same thing as we are. And if we were in their shoes, with looking through their eyes, their background, their emotions, their training, their programming, their brainwashing, we would be doing exactly the same thing that they're doing, promoting killing babies. And that's why there's no place to condemn anybody. There's just a place to get it stopped. So who do you think encourages women to jump into this pit of death and celebrate it as freedom and women's rights? Who do you think? Who teaches women to ignore their own incredible, awesome beauty, not just physically, but as living beings, as people, to ignore all that and accept this kind of murder and connect it with even sexual pleasure, which is being promoted this week, speaking of the news this week, and freedom? Guess who? And men aren't left out of this at all either. You have complete responsibility if you're a male. Sacred responsibility of the father is not just to support and protect the child, whether born or unborn, but to do a self-assessment. We're making so many mistakes. We don't have any place to jump on anybody else other than self-defense or defense of others, but not to condemn. Not for proactive violence, but the men have to do a self-assessment, try to become a good man, a good human, and then protect and love the woman and child before and after birth. Become the best man that you can. Not arrogant about we don't have anything to be arrogant about. Be careful of that, but grateful, because the value of what you do depends not just on what you do, but on who you become. I'm not quoting from a journal, telling you just one-on-one. Satanic side is teaching us about women's rights, and they want abortion right up to birth, pretending it's a woman's right. It's not even her body. It's in her body. What a responsibility, right? But it's not her body. And they want it up to age 3 after birth, and these governors that are talking about abortion after birth are talking about that being normal. Even doctors, even natural doctors, saying, well, the baby's not really a human completely. It goes in and out of the body. Half the time there's nobody there. So what's the big deal if you kill it? It doesn't even bother the real person because they just don't come back. Real convenient, all taken care of. Wrong. You know that. And they have groups called what is it, bioethical scientists. Sounds really impressive, right? They met in Australia a few years ago and decided officially, yes, the baby is not human or conscious and feels nothing until age 3. So it would really be good for the mother and the father to think about whether they really want it. And doctors like Governor Northam and others are saying that the baby's not really resuscitated until you decide to keep it. Him or her, I shouldn't say it. He made a really good discussion of this on video. It's not something we're making up. Good news channels, not the main ones, showed him, and local news, I think, had it until they realized they didn't want to show it, where he's explaining to some women who are big supporters of abortion right up to the last minute of birth and after. He says, is it really being blown out of proportion? I can tell you, because I'm a doctor, he's saying, it's really easy exactly what would happen. The infant, he made a mistake and didn't call it a thing or a fetus. The infant would be delivered if they don't manage to kill it before, like if they're still debating. And it would be kept comfortable. Obviously, it's a baby, right? They're going to keep it comfortable. And they take it in another room, and then 2 doctors, I mean, what could be more foolproof than that, have this discussion with the woman. This is Dr. Northam explaining it. And they have a discussion whether it should be resuscitated. It's in the other room breathing, right? But they say in order to fool you, it's not resuscitated in medical language. And in case the mother, for some strange reason, wants it resuscitated, then that would be done. And until then, until the decision is made, it's kept comfortable. And actually, it has to be kept alive and in good shape so the organs will be fresh so they can remove them and sell them. That's the business that these hospitals are in. That's the business Planned Parenthood is in. That's why government wants you to support it 100% and have it get, what was it, half or $750 million of tax money from the U.S. government every year to do this business of selling baby parts, which is additional profit and totally illegal. That's why we have to have censorship, so you can't talk about it. Like I said, we're trying hard not to talk about anything controversial. I'm just not very good at it. So I'm trying, though. So anyway, the scientists who know the best, they say that the baby is not alive. It's not a conscious person, doesn't feel anything till at least age 3. And the legal people that I've talked to say that the bill like this that was passed in New York, like the one in Virginia, but the one in New York that the governor signed with the cheering ladies all around him, these are really sick women who are out of touch with who they are. There's no upper age limit. If the baby survives pre-birth abortion, you can still keep killing it, and it's fine. It's not killing a person. Mothers that got murdered before that were pregnant, and the murderer got charged with 2 murders, that's all over in New York. They only charge 1 now because the baby's a thing, which should make the women's rights people overjoyed. I guess they are, because they were cheering. We got programmed and tricked, and a lot of us are still under that. So, in a way, it's true, it is about women's rights, but not the right to kill the baby. It's the right to become this incredible, beautiful being that she is, and see through all the nonsense of the governors and the rulers and the monsters who are telling people to do stuff like this. So she has a right to protect and love the child before and after birth. The person who's trusting her, because he or she doesn't have a fully developed body yet, total trust with his or her life and future destiny on the planet. That's all in the hands of the mother. So there's where the women's rights come in, to give everything she's got to protect that. And the most amazing part, I think, actually, is that anybody could fall into that kind of insanity. But if you're in it, and friends of mine are in it, you can wake up whenever you want. It's just your decision. You're right, like talking about rights. And instantly change your future if you open your eyes. And the world's future, because you as an individual are not the 1 out of 7 billion, helpless, weak, unintelligent, dependent being that they tell you are. If they told you the truth, it would be that you're infinitely important to the world and the future because of the dormant abilities that you're not supposed to remember. You've still got those. And when you wake up, it starts to affect everybody you're connected to. And you're connected to everybody. And that's even if you say nothing. So with the developments in this particular issue this week, it's two poles, light and dark. It's not partisan, although it tends to line up that way. It shouldn't be. The parties are a complete distraction. Both of them are completely corrupt criminal organizations, looks like to me. But I can't think of a single issue that's really partisan. And I've been talking to offices of many of the presidential candidates this week. Not the Republican ones, because I don't think there are any to run against the incumbent, but there are a whole bunch of Democratic ones. And in most areas, just amazing coincidence, they all think the same thing in different words, some different words. Don't you think it's amazing that they all just happen to have the same opinion? I talk to a lot of them and they say, yes, we want border security. They've all started saying that now in the U.S. But we don't want a wall. That's racist and hurtful, and it kills people and it harms people and it doesn't work, and the experts say it doesn't work and it's a waste of money, and we want to be responsible with the taxpayers' dollars and not waste them. Every office I talk to, that's exactly what all of them think. Even though it's completely ridiculous, that's what all of them think. Why should it be a partisan issue? So, what about other examples of insanity in current events happening this week? And before I get into the next example, which I'll try to make completely uncontroversial, I thought we'd like to have Doug, our great engineer producer for the show, come on for a minute and tell you, just in case they think we're talking about controversial things, how to stay in touch with live streaming and anything connected with that. If you want to come on for a second and explain that to people so I don't say it wrong, Doug, because I'm not any expert in tech stuff.
No problem at all.
If you're there.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so as far as the places that they can find us if and when we get banned, that's an important thing, because as you know, YouTube and others are censoring heavily. Facebook, we haven't really had too much trouble with Facebook yet, but we already are having problems with YouTube, and we have for quite some time, from the standpoint of our view counts and stuff like that being heavily suppressed. We know for certain that that's going on. I mean, I did at least one video about that, proving that that's true. So really, I would think it's probably just a matter of time before we get banned on at least one of our two channels. And if that does happen and we disappear from there and or YouTube, and or Facebook, we can still be found in other places. That's one of the reasons when we start our live stream, it takes about a minute really before the show starts, because I'm starting 6 different live streams all at one time. So as you're talking, you're going out on 6 different live streams on 5 different platforms all at once. And
neat. Okay.
Yeah, and that is for 2 YouTube channels. We've got our Lost Arts Radio YouTube channel and our backup channel, which is my channel, the Diamond Disc channel. Right. We may or may not have trouble with either one of those. It just depends. We don't have a strike officially yet on the Lost Arts channel, but we we do have a warning, which is the step before the first strike.
And a lot of people are getting 3 strikes all at one time now.
Yeah. Yeah, some people are getting banned just overnight, disappearing, just channels going away. But that was for the Kerry Rivera video, as you well know. That was our warning.
I don't think you're allowed to say Kerry Rivera, are you?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Anyway, if you go to our page on our site, lostartsradio.com/live, that is our jumping off point to all of the different live streams that I mentioned, and that would cover any of this particular news show. This Lost Arts Radio Live is a live stream, and occasionally we do live streams with guests, but for the most part, we're talking about this particular show that you and I are talking on right now.
Right.
LostArtsRadio.com/live. It's got links to our 2 YouTube channels, to our Facebook page, and then our other 3 channels are on Periscope, Twitch, and DLive. And you're welcome to check that out. It's pretty easy to find, LostArtsRadio.com/live. And the other thing we were going to ask people to do when you're there, in the right-hand column on every page is a green button that says, actually the button's black, but it's a green area that says newsletter sign up. So if people will sign up for our free newsletter list, it's actually just a free email list. We don't send out a newsletter at this time. However, people can go there and register their email address, and that way if we do happen to get banned, we can let people know where to find us.
Yeah, we'll stay in touch. Okay. That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted to make sure that gets really clear. And, get on the list today before you forget, if you get a chance. The second issue, and I'm going to go quickly through a few others because this is related to current events and certainly things that are happening this week. And as Doug was just talking about, censorship is intensifying, even though the U.S. president is finally, really late in my opinion, but at least he's doing it, setting up to really go after the big tech companies, Google and Twitter and Facebook, and YouTube is owned by Google and other companies like that, for antitrust violations, meaning monopolizing big markets and buying up any other people that might be competitors. So there's only one source, and they control the thinking of a vast section of the population. That's illegal in America. Should be illegal everywhere, because there's no guarantee that the people who get a hold of that won't use it for harm, which is exactly what's happening right now. And they're labeling, like has been done by other tyrants in the past, anything that is dissonant, that doesn't agree with politically correct speech in their opinion and what you need to be all talking about in unison, that's labeled as hate speech. And if it's undeniably true, like reading out of a source that everybody knows is accurate, well, that has a new term. It's called hate facts that you're not supposed to hear. I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm sure we've been guilty of repeating hate facts without realizing how bad they were. Many of the people who are really intelligent are actually working for the social media companies or for the corrupt mainstream media, and actually promoting censorship and trying to tell people that anything that disagrees is hate speech, all this kind of stuff. And working to remove all the content that shows a number of things that you're not allowed to show. Good things of the U.S. president are banned right now. You can't talk about those. You have to portray him as an evil Russian agent who hates women and people of all races and is a lazy, egotistical fool who doesn't do any work and just lies around with Cheetos all over his shirt and stuff like that, waiting to go to bed. That's not exactly accurate about who the president is right now. But a lot of people are starting to believe it if they're hypnotized in front of the TV. Many who are intelligent enough to know that all this is false stay in the fog, half asleep, and obey orders and media lies, and they keep defaming all kinds of good people and ideas because it's profitable and it's comfortable and they've got a good job doing it. So they just kind of eliminate their conscience. But you can't kill your conscience. You can just make it dormant. And the longer you wait to bring it back to life, the more uncomfortable it is for a while after you do that. So one of the reasons that it affects your future if you do that is that it's our own deeper consciousness that sees everything that we do, including what we think and feel and say. And it arranges to bring us experiences to show us why what we did was not a very good idea to do, and it would be better to change it now. And instead of waiting to be dragged through those experiences, which will happen, you don't have to be punished by an outside source. You can't get away from your own inner consciousness. It's made from the source that you came from. It'd be better to think about it twice right now. And if you're inside this system and you're looking at our show and thinking about whether to censor us or other shows that you think you've been told to shut down, think about it. It's your responsibility. And what you decide is what you carry with you. So my suggestion is use your position inside the structure to do good instead. And if you're careful about it, you don't even have to get punished for it, but do it because it's important. Here's another example I'm just thinking of, again, looking through the ones that there's no controversy about. And I apologize to you before, I'm not very good at choosing those, but let's try this one. There are people staying in a belief system, very popular now, it's got over 1 billion people in it, that tells us that God hates everybody who's not a member of our religion and wants us to convert them or kill them so that our religion can rule the world and make God just really happy with us and send us to paradise. I'm not mentioning the name of it because you're not allowed to, but it is a hate fact, I guess. But you might be able to guess if you had long enough what I'm talking about. There are ancient examples of this, but it's going on right now too. And by ancient, I mean thousands of years ago. So the philosophy is that lying is okay, stealing is okay, rape is okay, murder is okay, invasion of foreign countries is okay because it's all okay because it's for God, right? And it's for you to go to paradise. If you've gone down to the level of believing that, you might check how you feel while you're believing it. And you'll notice that you're full of aggressive hatred and desiring destruction of people who don't agree with you. And think about that and think about who God actually is. There are examples of ancient beliefs that did this long ago. And as I said, it's very popular today, and it's really attractive to people devoted to the spirit of hate and death, and they're so hateful of themselves. In every case, you find out that this is true. They may not even consciously be aware of it, that they want to take it out on whoever they can, and if their religion or their belief system says, excuse me, that all these other people are not converting to your religion, so you need to kill them, invade their country, rape them if they're women so that you can have children in their country and spread it faster. This reflects some real dark stuff within you. And if you continue going along with it, then you find out the truth of it later on, and it's not comfortable. So I'm just saying there's a lot of people within those belief systems who have been brave, real heroic people, women and men. We've had some of the women on our Sunday show, and they break free of it. They realize that religions that are responsible for killing millions of people are not a really good idea to get into or to stay in if you're born in them. So if you're caught inside one of them, I understand that most of them say the penalty is death for even suggesting leaving, but staying in is suicide on a spiritual level, and it's not really a good idea to do. This has nothing to do with hating anybody. It has to do with loving people and not wanting them to destroy themselves. That kind of insanity doesn't belong to you. It's not. It was never yours, no matter how early you started memorizing it. And you're free to wake up and walk away anytime, no matter what the belief system is. I'm not restricting it to one particular one at all. Beware of thinking with the crowd, with the mob. That's true democracy, by the way, and that's not what America was ever promoting or was built on. We'll talk about that more when we get a chance. Kurt Russell, one of the Hollywood heroic movie stars, was on video this week, another current event, as a guest on, I think it was on that program called The View, and he was explaining to them the reality of what's the issue of gun control. Now, this is not partisan. It certainly shouldn't be controversial. And he was explaining why it's deadly. Gun control is deadly to individual freedom and national security in the real sense. The reason is because really vicious rulers have always tried to disarm their subjects before they get around to killing dissidents and removing the last freedoms. It's not just 1930s Germany. It's Cambodia, it's communist China, it's North Korea and its history. It's all these places. And there are so-called free countries that are no longer free, that are making sure to take all the weapons away from regular people. Australia is one, for example. There are videos of truckloads of firearms taken from law-abiding citizens by force, giving them no choice, and piling them up and promoting this myth that now Australia is totally peaceful. No, there is actually another mass murder in Australia now where everything's totally peaceful and no guns are legal. So it's a matter of real life intelligence. And since the rulers are afraid that this might actually happen and we might actually start waking up to the reality of this, it's forbidden to tell the truth about it. And organizations like NRA and maybe GOA soon are under attack for trying to remind people, no, the criminal and the tyrannical government are still going to have all their weapons or more. It's just you're not. And so you're being sold this thing where you're the crazy person who can't be trusted, but the criminals and the government are fine to have them. And as is being demonstrated in London now, if it's not easy enough to get guns, well, they get cars and run over you. Banning the tools is completely opposite to the approach that's needed, which is about consciousness and about drug use. And, you know, in the school shootings, almost every single one of them is a person that's on psychiatric drugs, and those haven't been banned, unfortunately, yet. They probably should be. I'm not against the freedom, but when you take drugs like that, whose known side effect mentioned right on the package insert, if you get a hold of it in a good magnifying glass and read the fine print, what are the so-called side effects? And by the way, side effects, you know what those are? Those are just effects. The word side is just to distract you and fool you, to think that it's a minor effect that hardly ever happens, or maybe never happens and just has to be written down for some strange reason. That's not the reality. Side effects are the main effects. So when you read them from now on or hear them on a television ad with people frolicking through green fields full of flowers, and you're hearing the soft voice in the background speaking at 10 times normal speed that it may kill you, and these are the insignificant side effects like, you know, stopping your heart and destroying your brain and stuff like that, realize that those are the actual effects of the drug. Another thing you're not supposed to know. But the chant coming from the hypnotized people is restrict the guns so no more crazy people get them. And this has been talked about by totally hypnotized crazy people at town hall meetings, by all the Democratic candidates who are all in favor of getting rid of most or all of the rights under the U.S. Second Amendment. Really not intelligent. And some of these people are very intelligent in the sense that they would do well on IQ tests, but real life common sense, it's just totally gone. They're zombies. And they don't realize fully who they're working for. Because if they did, they would never touch it. They would say, no, if I'm a teacher in school and this crazy person on psychiatric drugs comes through the door with a gun, and no, it doesn't have to be an AR-15 or an assault weapon, just any kind of gun. Let's see, do I want to be totally defenseless and watch the kids die and wait for the police to come, or in Florida, like where they were told to just stand down after they came so they didn't even do anything? Or do I want to be able to risk my life and defend the kids? How many hours do you need to think about that? And the hypnotized people come up with, well, teachers can't be trusted. It's like they're so far gone, it's hard to even have a discussion. But the teachers have to be trained first, you see, like citizens, to use firearms responsibly. And the trained, licensed individual firearms owners have about the lowest crime rate of any group on the planet. So saying, well, the teachers are all crazy, that's not true. And remember when Sweden first got invaded and all the women were getting raped by these people doing it for God, and so they could go to paradise and invade the country and have babies born to their religion so that they could take over faster and make God really happy. How many of those women that were victimized were trained and armed? Do you remember? Do you know? Everybody should know. As far as I know, that number is at or close to 0. So why is that? Why were all those women turned into innocent targets of these religious fanatic predators who wanted to rape them to go to paradise and take over the country? Really, that's the reason they did it. And the crazy Swedish rulers were saying, well, it's their culture. You know, it's the women's fault. And stupid things like that they were saying in France and England, and especially in London. You train and arm those women with appropriate handguns sized for their convenience, and 0 rapes. After the first few were tried, they would give up the experiment. What would have happened in the school shootings if the teachers were trained and armed? Very few dead kids, if any. But if you try to explain this to somebody totally hypnotized who just is feverishly believing, because they memorized it, that gun control would save lives, they can't even hear you. They're gone. And see, real science is not gone. It questions everything. The devotion to getting rid of the Second Amendment rights, which, by the way, people have worldwide, even though they're canceling them now in New Zealand with the excuse that the crazy person who killed the innocent Muslims in the mosque, none of whom were armed. How many of those Muslims would have died if they were armed, trained and armed, responsible? Probably 0. So if you have that clear vision, you understand. If you don't, but if you've read Lord of the Rings, well, people don't read much anymore, but maybe you saw the movie. What would have happened if Gandalf had declared Middle-earth a sword-free zone to make Frodo and Sam safe? Really, look at that. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's one of the really good movies available right now. It's in 3 parts. Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I'm thinking a lot of you have seen it. What would have happened if Middle-earth had been declared a sword-free zone, especially where Frodo and Sam had to go? They would have been killed by the first orcs they met, cut into small pieces. And the ring would have been lost. So it reminds me, there was a funny Gun-Free Zone cartoon a year or two ago on the news channel that you're forbidden to mention for your own safety because it's so hateful. And they, I forget, there was a great cartoonist, one of the really good ones, and he had drawn this picture of this really old lady. She looks about 300 years old, and she's lying in bed, peacefully snoring. You know, there's Z letters coming out of her mouth above her body, and obviously totally asleep. And this Snidely Whiplash type mugger is sleeping her into the room to kill and rape her, or rape and kill her, whatever comes first. Excuse me. And the guy's just about to jump on her in her bed, and she just lifts one eyelid, reaches down and holds up a sign that says Gun-Free Zone. And Snidely goes, "Rats. If only it hadn't been a gun-free zone, I could have killed her." If you're not too far gone, think about that cartoon. It could save a lot of lives, but not the way people are being programmed. Now, that doesn't mean that you're supposed to live by the sword. That has really bad results. And aggressive violence is really self-destructive in every case. It's not a good idea. But to give up self-defense in a dangerous environment is not a sign of intelligence at all. It really isn't. And it has nothing to do with parties. I know a lot of you who promote it are thinking in terms of parties, but it shouldn't be partisan. It should be obvious. Making weapons and violence illegal does not make the world safe. Unfortunately, it just does the opposite. And hypnotized people can't look at this clearly. They just get emotionally upset. That's part of their programming. They just get really mad, and they want to silence the conversation or change the subject. They're under a hypnotic spell. And if you're one of them, you don't have to stay there. You know, part of this hypnotic spell business is that you're strong enough to get out of it, walk away from it anytime. You know, the mob may not be happy with you, but your inner self will be. And if you start being true to yourself no matter what, you're going to experience better stuff in your life. It's really the same hypnotic programming, all coming from the same place, that tells us that country borders are bad and racist, and many intelligent people believe it. Their common sense is gone. The situation at the southern U.S. border is really dire at this point. Media is just starting to have to admit it, but they're blaming it on the president instead of their own propaganda. And the president's been blocked by Congress, including his own party. When they had both houses in their own party, they didn't do anything. And his advisors have been traitors to a large extent. That's starting to change now. All Americans should have been demanding a complete physical border from day one. You know, it's not hard to understand unless you're in a party that has a talking point policy that the border barrier is bad. They used to think it's good, but now because they hate the president and he acknowledges it's necessary, they have to think it's bad. So they all say it's bad. And I talked to an office a few days ago, and a candidate from Hawaii, excuse me, I'm supposed to have one of those buttons on here that makes it quiet when you cough. I don't have one. And I said, I want to talk to somebody, a high-up officer in your campaign, who understands why you're against a border barrier, and just have a discussion. They gave me to the person who called me back, who was a high-up representative of the candidate that she had told to talk to me. And they their idea of a discussion is saying what they think, what they're going to do, and they don't want to know what you want to do. And they said, as with all the other candidates in their party, they said, we absolutely believe in border security. They all say that now, but not a border that has really bad optics. It sends a message of racism, of xenophobia, of hating immigrants like the president does, which is not true. And they're in favor of absolutely protecting the border and leaving it wide open physically. And you're supposed to see nothing wrong with that point of view. That's in the news this week because the numbers crossing the border is passing all previous records. Even last month, it's like an average of a third more than last month. Huge numbers are pouring in. And the president is starting to work with Mexico. He came up with an idea, well, if Congress is going to block putting a border wall, like, common sense type thing, then I'll talk to the Mexican government and say, okay, if you want trade with America and you want to make money from it, a big part of which goes to the government down there, then take care of your border with Guatemala. Secure it with a border that don't just have a piece of cyclone fence and a couple of soldiers that just let them knock over the fence, and then the UN funded trucks and buses take thousands and thousands of invaders from Central America and Africa now and China and everywhere up to America and just dump them over the border with the so-called authorities that just say, okay, you're all asylum seekers, we have to let you in, and because we have no place to keep you, we're just going to release you into the country, and please come back in a couple of years for a court trial, which they don't do. That's not a very intelligent policy unless you're trying to destroy the country, which was exactly why that policy was put in place previously. So the currently president, says, well, we don't want to destroy the country, we want to turn it around. So look, President of Mexico, you know that trade thing that you want? 5% tariff on every item that you're going to sell in the U.S., which is going to make the companies leave Mexico and come into the U.S. And if you don't block the invasion at the Guatemala border, which is where it's passing through, then that goes up every month until it reaches 25%. And so the Mexican authorities went on TV and said, the president of the U.S. is Hitler, and this is a fascist thing to do. It's obviously racist. He hates immigrants, all this stupid stuff. And that didn't work. He just said, okay, we're starting at Monday, day after tomorrow. And they said, what was that number again, the 5%? How many millions of dollars in government fees does that stop us from collecting? Okay, well, you're not Hitler. Why don't we have a meeting in Washington? So they did. And now they're setting up barriers at Guatemala, and they're starting to deport people who broke through and other things. They're starting to keep them in Mexico. Even after they get a court hearing date in a few years, they keep them in Mexico and don't let them in. Big changes happen, while all the critics of the president are saying, it doesn't work, it's all useless, it's xenophobic, and they just keep playing this tape. And the Mexican government says, no, it isn't. It's reasonable, and we're going to cooperate because we want the money. Brilliant move. And it's being heavily attacked. The UN plan has been to destroy sovereign countries and create chaos and get people to beg for world government because of the chaos to restore power and security. That's exactly where they're going. With complete censorship, no free speech, all dissent called hate speech, and biosphere extermination. That's the policy. Nothing to do with either party. They're both totally out of it, understanding what's going on. And the U.S. president is very late doing anything about this. But this week he's moving through the trade tariffs That is a very important thing to do. European leaders could have protected their borders right away too, but the unelected criminal authorities like the EU and the UN don't have any power unless the countries stay as members. They all need to withdraw from the UN and the UK and the EU, just like the UK is trying to get out of the EU and announced Brexit, but they didn't follow through on it because they had a traitor in position as a prime minister. A real leader would have just declared the membership void that day. No deal is required. That's a bunch of nonsense. And hopefully they'll wake up and get some leaders that do have clarity of vision. People like Farage and Robinson, who should have been in there and was denied access to social media, so couldn't do it. But in all these issues, the main thing is to get back our sanity and common sense. Both the general population and the leaders in government and corporations. They all have a deep responsibility to protect the well-being of freedom of the people. The government only rules by permission of the people, and the corporations, they don't get away from all this just because they're so-called private companies. That doesn't make any difference. You know, they're allowed to make as much money as they want. That's great, but not by hurting and killing people. Those kind of businesses are not legitimate. They don't need to exist in any of these countries that are being run by benevolent leaders or organizations or constitutional republics like the U.S. By the way, those only work if you have a conscious population. And if you had a conscious group of individuals who wrote the Constitution to begin with, if it's a bad Constitution, it doesn't help you. So make as much money as you can, but not with deadly drugs, toxic agriculture, toxic EMF, drug medicine, selling baby parts, injections, censoring competition. None of that stuff is legitimate business. And it looks like it's going to be moved on now in the U.S. and hopefully elsewhere as well. All these parties and labels, they just cause blindness and fighting. If you're part of them right now and you find yourself inside the system and you're listening, you have a choice. You might be under pressure, but nobody can force you to make the wrong decision. We're only in the physical body for brief time. When you leave, all the impressions of what you did stay with you. Might as well make them good, right? Has a good effect on other people too. So one of the things we're doing right now is we're looking for brave, honest people in positions of government or corporate power. If you're one of those people, even if you're a censor, a monitor of this broadcast, hired to shut us down, think about it. If you're in one of those positions, anywhere in government, we've had some good representatives on lately, American and other, like Danish too, other things. But I don't care what country you're in, Africa, Asia, Australia, South America, America. Even America has some good people in government. Get in touch with us. We have projects to do that are going to shut down the nonsense of partisan label type thinking. We don't have time to waste on that stuff. It's time to actually work for the benefit of your fellow human, which means for the benefit of yourself. It's the most selfish thing you could possibly do, working to hurt and kill other people so that you'll get things. That's not selfish. That's really stupid, because you're not going to get what you think. Don't brush it off. It's true. Be selfish. Pour out everything that you've got to help other people in the world. If you know anybody like that could be reached, please reach us at richard@lostartsradio.com. The projects most sensitive to censorship will be done on planetaryhealingclub.com. If you're ready for it, you can check that out anytime. We meet live every week, planetaryhealingclub.com. And in case we disappear, stay in touch at lostartsradio.com, lostartsradio.com/live. Mail in your feedback, your comments. If you want to be a part of this, Richard at lostartsradio.com and planetaryhealingclub.com, and watch for free videos during the week as well, and the guest show Sunday, tomorrow. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to talk to you, and we'll see you next time.